In the last video lecture, we talked about the approach, or how we start a meeting when we're face-to-face with a prospective client or a buyer or a customer, etc. Now we're going to move on to the second phase of the presentation, and that is questioning and understanding needs through questioning. Now, as you know, and as we've talked about in the past, we use the spin selling technique here in this class for questioning. So I'm going to review again spin selling in this chapter. Even though we've gone over it every single time we've been together, I still want to talk about spin selling, and I still want to talk about all of the different elements of spin selling, because that is a tried and true methodology for questioning. But until then, let's get busy with chapter 11 in our Selling Today book. So this chapter is all about determining customer needs with consultative question strategy. So the last time we were together, or the last video lecture actually, we weren't together, this has all been done on a video lecture, but the last video lecture we talked about the approach, establishing a rapport with the approach and gathering the prospect and the customer's attention, and different strategies and different models in order for the approach and to gather attention and to start building that relationship and that rapport with the prospect or the customer. Now we're going to talk about needs discovery. And if you ask any salesperson who's worth their salt, they'll tell you that need discovery is truly the key to any successful sales call, any successful salesperson, or any successful sales career. Need discovery is all about understanding what does the prospect want, what problems are the prospect having, what problems are the customers having, and then trying to fit your solution or adapt a solution or determine a solution to fit those prospects' needs. Obviously, and I've said this before in class, obviously if the prospect or the customer or the buyer is going to see you, they obviously have a problem. They wouldn't waste their time seeing you if they didn't have a problem. So one of the things that it's our job to understand is what problem they're having and how can we fit a solution to that problem better than the competition is fitting a solution to that problem. In just about every sales call you're going to run into, a prospect or a customer or a buyer might be using or is using a competitive product. So what we need to understand is what do they like about that competitive product, what they don't like about that competitive product, etc., etc. And we do that all the way, all through needs discovery. Then later on, as we get into the semester and the last few chapters of the book, we're going to get into presentation skills, negotiation. They call it negotiation. I call it handling objections, but it's the same thing. Closing the sale and then servicing the sale. So all those comes later on. Now, as you know, and as we've talked about many times in the past, and as we've talked about in just about every time we've gotten together, we use a technique called spin selling. And I am going to take, and I introduced spin selling in chapter 2, and we've been role-playing spin selling every time we've gotten together ever since the first day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reiterate again spin selling in this particular module, because that is the approach that we use for need discovery. It's the approach that we use in personal selling in the undergraduate level. It's also the approach that we're going to use here in the graduate level. So there's basic questioning. There's closed questions and there's open questions. Closed questions are basic yes or no answer. Are you, could you, would you, do you, will you, those types of things. Now they're not true or false. They're not blue, green, black. It's not a tactical open question. It is a closed question. All you're looking for is a yes or no answer. In these yes or no answers, you're trying to find out information, etc., etc. Oftentimes we use closed questions or tactical open questions, which is I'm going to get into in the next couple of slides. Oftentimes we use that type of questioning for a prospect or a buyer who won't give information freely. So oftentimes, in order to get a buyer to talk also, or a prospect to talk,
a lot of people will start with closed questioning, and that sometimes will break the ice and get the buyer to talk. It's all depends on the style in which you want to use, or the style in which the salesperson wants to use. But sometimes if you're not having success with the open questionings, closed questionings will help get the buyer or the prospect to start talking. Oftentimes, as people write down their questioning worksheet, which we're going to talk about in a few slides, oftentimes as they write down their questioning worksheet, their first couple of questions are always closed questions. Open questions, there's two types of open questions. There's tactical questions and there's strategic questions. Open questions encourage the prospect to open up, provide information, and speak freely. Who, what, where, why, when, tell me about, explain to me how, what are you doing with, what do you like about, those types of things. Those are very open, situational questions, and we're going to get to that in spin selling in just a minute. Very open, situational questions, getting the prospect or the buyer to talk, getting them to open up. Now, with the open questions, there's two types. There's tactical and there's strategic. The tactical, or well, we'll go with strategic first then. I guess I thought it was a tactical was coming up next, but we'll go with the strategic. The strategic open questions tells you how the customer feels and helps reveal problems and needs. Tell me about. What are some of the? Can you explain to me how? Different things like that. Why did you buy? What do you like about the competition? What don't you like about the competition? Those types of questions. What problems are you having? Are strategic, open questions that will help a prospect or a buyer open up and start speaking freely. If you can ask strategic, open questions, you're going to start gathering more information than you will with closed questioning. The thing about closed questioning is very directive, and unless you kind of know the answer, it's hard to direct them. You see, oftentimes in courtroom dramas on TV and things like that, they use a lot of closed questions because they know the answer and they want to hear the answer, a lot of yes or no. Don't use a lot of strategic open questions because they're afraid of what's coming out. In sales, it's different. The more you can use a strategic open question, the better off it is. Now, with that being said, oftentimes you've only got so much time with the prospect or the buyer. So sometimes you actually need to direct the open questions with closed questions to keep the person on track. If they talk a lot or talk too much, sometimes a lot of time can be wasted in your meeting, especially if you have a limited time in that meeting with the prospect or the buyer going off on different tangents and things like that. So you can use a variety of open questions, open strategic questions, and closed questions, and also tactical questions, which is on this page. Tactical questions gives you data. It helps redirect the conversation. It helps keep the conversation on track. What is your customer number? How many employees are there? How often do you place an order? How often does that happen? What type of system do you use? What type of, who is your trucking company? All those types of things are not yes and no answers, so they're not closed questions, but they're what we call tactical open questions. Oftentimes, people use tactical open questions to gather more information, to follow up on a question, to ensure that the customer knows that you're listening. Oftentimes, you'll use a tactical open question to give you data and let the prospect or the customer know that you're listening. For instance, they might say, I've got a problem with this. And you can say, well, how often does that happen? So that they understand that you're listening and you know, etc. So a huge part of the consultative sales process and providing value to the customer or to the prospect is to understand their needs. And that's one of the reasons why we use the questioning techniques of both open, tactical, open strategic, and closed questions. As we consult, as we become more of a consultative salesperson, we increase customer satisfaction. We're able to close more sales. It also helps keep the competition away. It helps keep your customer happy and satisfied. There's fewer cancellations. There's more chances for repeat business, more increased referrals, etc. Remember, again, and I've said this, I think I've said this on just about every module that I've taught so far, what we're not trying to do is sell a product. We are trying to provide solutions to customer problems or needs. That's what we do. In order to find those solutions to customer problems or needs, we need to understand what those needs are. We need to make sure that we're listening. We need to make sure that we're asking the right question and uncovering the right needs. Again, the prospect or the buyer or the customer would not be seeing you unless they've got a problem. They aren't just going to waste time talking to a salesperson. Oftentimes they talk to a salesperson because they have a problem and they want that problem or that need filled with a solution. So here's a consultative sales process guide. Again, take this with a grain of salt. Need discovery, selection of a solution, need satisfaction, and servicing. Again, we're all on the needs discovery process. That's what this chapter is all about, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. How much time is spent on need discovery? Well, that depends. If a prospective customer or a customer or a buyer will give you a need, generally speaking, I'll confirm the need and I'll present a solution to the need and then go back and see if there's other needs. So if the prospect is very forthcoming with their problems and their needs, well, then little time is spent and you just make sure you're confirming that, and then you're going through the presentation and determining the solution in which to fill that prospect's needs. If in fact it's a long selling process and there's multiple people that you have to talk to, then the needs discovery can take months and months and months. So it really varies on the sophistication of the product. It varies on selling price. It also varies on how open the prospect is, how many buying people in the buying center, how many influencers there are, how many people you need to see, all those types of things. For instance, when I was selling in a hospital situation, the administration had much different needs than, say, a infection control nurse or an epidemiologist or head of surgery or something like that. So with regards to that, oftentimes needs discovery took months and months and months, long selling cycle, but since everybody had different needs, I had to have solutions for all of those needs. So it also depends on customer's knowledge, time availability, etc., etc. All selling situations are different. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to adapt, and that's why we call this an adaptive and consultative selling process to the situation at hand. So 3 dimensions of need discovery. You've got needs discovery, asking appropriate question, listening and establishing, then selection of the solution, matching benefits with the problems, and then you've got your needs satisfaction presentation. So figure 11.3 talks about the dimensions of needs discovery and how important that is. Again, in this particular chapter, we're still on the needs discovery, the spin selling technique, and trying to uncover needs in order to fit a solution to those customers' needs. So again, here's spin selling, situational questions, problem questions, implication questions, and need payoff questions. S, P, I, N. And they're questions that help clarify the exact dimensions of the problem, etc., etc. Hopefully, this is not new to you because we've been using it every single time we're together, but it bears going over because, again, this is what we use for both the undergraduate and at the graduate level. So situational questions deal with the facts about the buyer's existing situation. What's going on in the particular buyer's business, what's going on in their products, what's going on with whatever happens to be in the business. Then problem questions ask about the buyer's pain and focus the buyer on this pain while clarifying the problem. So situational questions might be, tell me about blah, blah, blah. Help me with how do you do, what are some of the issues with. And then problems questions, you would ask things like, well, how much of a problem is that? How much does that, is it a problem? Tell me about how that can be a problem, etc. Implication, and then need payoff. We're going to go over each one of those. Situational questions deals with obtaining information. Tell me about how you. How does it work when you? Can you explain to me how much time does it take to? Is it a lot? Blah, blah, blah. Situational questions deal with, again, obtaining information regarding the prospect's current situation and what's going on in their business. As you start talking about situational questions, then you can talk about, is that a problem? Has that ever been a problem? Would it be a problem if? And those are called your problem discovery questions. Those questions help to show the prospects their problem. Have you currently received any products that had defects? Tell me about it. What type of defects? What errors occurs when that happens? It ever a problem? What type of problems are you having with blah, blah, blah? You know, oftentimes people don't use what types of problems that you're having, but generally speaking, customers are having problems. And to ask that question, oftentimes they are forthcoming. Now, if you are good and you understand your competition and you understand and you've done your homework and you're pre-planned for the call and you know what the prospect is using and your competition, then you can ask a closed question, that says, have you ever had a problem with? Especially if you know that might be a shortcoming of your competition or a shortcoming of what's going on. So problem discovery questions, again, helps understand the problems. Then you've got problem impact questions. These questions help the prospect see the impact of the problem. How many people does it take? How much does it cost you? What do you think it's costing you when that happens? How much time? Is it a manual process? All those things that get into the implication or impact questions. That starts, so with a situation, again, it's a funnel effect. With a situation, you're trying to talk about the prospect's situation and what's going on in their business. Then you're asking the type of, well, have you had any problems with that? Or tell me how you could have a problem with that. Or tell me, does this ever occur? These types of things will start getting into the problem questions. And then you got to go into the impact questions. And these questions help the prospect see the impact of the problem. Oftentimes it's cost, it could be time, it could be frustration, it could be anything. And then finally, solution value. I always use the phrase, would it be helpful? I don't like to threaten. I don't, by saying, if I could, then would you? I don't like that. I think it's threatening, and I think it backs a prospect or a buyer into a corner. My favorite is, would it be helpful if you had an automated process? Would it be helpful if I could show you? Would it be helpful if you had something that? Generally speaking, it's a very non-threatening question. It's a closed probe or a closed question. It gets the buyer to agree. And then you can go into your presentation to show them how you have whatever it would have been when it was helpful for them. And then finally, closing questions can also be trial closes. Have I shown you how? Oftentimes, does it sound like this might be something that you're interested in? These are closing questions. Have I answered all your questions? Can you see how this would solve your needs? Can you see how this would take care of the problem that you are having? If you get a yes on these, and again, closing questions are oftentimes closed questions. If you get a yes on that, then the next thing would be to close. Well, then can I place an order? So closing questions set up the close. The close sets up the objections. You're always going to have objections. You're never going to be the best quality at the cheapest price. The prospect is never going to have all the time in the world. You're always going to get objections. So with the closing questions, you're asking these closed questions to set up your close, and then your close does nothing more than setting up your objections, because very rarely is someone going to say yes on the first close. So they'll give you an objection. You're going to have to handle that objection and then go back and close again. So as I talked about, here's the funnel effect. The situational questions are very, very broad. They're asking the customer, the prospect, about their business. They're asking them about different things that happen in their business, etc. Very broad, gets the customer talking about their business. Oftentimes, these questions are very, again, broad, very open, and we're just trying to get the prospect to start talking about their business. Problem questions then starts honing down on, have you ever had a problem with, or tell me about how problems occur with this. So now we're starting to take a look at not only their business, but what problems they have in their business. It's very, very simple. Then impact questions. Impact questions will be talking about how big is the problem. How much is it costing you? How much time? How much frustration? How much customer satisfaction? So we're talking about business with situational questions, asking them about their business. With the problem questions, we're trying to understand, have they had a problem with this? What problems they're having? Impact questions is how important those problems are and how much impact those problems have had on the person's business. And then finally, the need payoff questions. Usually they're tactical open or they're closed questions. Would it be helpful if I could? Tell me if you had a solution, how much would that help you? Things like that. That's your need payoff questions. So here's a sample need discovery worksheet. I don't want you to pay attention to the particular questions that they have here. What I want you to pay attention to is a needs discovery worksheet is absolutely key. Understanding your questions before you go in, so you're not tripping over your words, you're not umming and ahhing and these things. Remember, you have a limited amount of time. What I usually do in my needs discovery workshop is I use that spin selling funnel that we see right here. And I think about the situational questions that I'm going to want to ask. And then I think about the problem questions that I'm going to want to ask. And then the impact questions. And then the need payoff questions. And I actually write them down going into the call so I can practice them. Now, in this particular needs discovery worksheet, the book suggests that you write down a customer response. You can do that if you would like, or you can just simply take notes. However, remember, in the approach, as we talked about in the last module, and in the approach in which we talked about the last time that we did a video lecture, make sure that you're asking the prospect or the buyer if you can take notes, making sure that they understand that you're just taking notes on the conversation, so you're putting the particular prospect or buyer at ease. Here's the second page of the needs discovery workshop. Again, the questions should be your own. It should pertain to the customer's business. It should pertain to your products, etc. The key here is not the questions that you're seeing, but the key here is making sure that your questions and your line of questioning is well thought out, and it follows this particular funnel effect. It should follow the funnel effect in such that you use situational questions that are very broad, then start narrowing it down through problem questions, impact questions, and then finally need payoff questions. So active listening is another key aspect of need discovery. You're never going to discover someone's needs unless you listen. Therefore, if you ask wide open questions, you're going to be doing a lot of listening during the needs discovery part. And that's absolutely key to make sure that you are listening to what they say, you're writing it down, you're showing empathy, especially if there's a problem. You're showing empathy to the problem, and you're not pouncing. One of the things you don't want to do is pounce. You want to show empathy to the customer's business. You want to show empathy to the customer's problem questions. You want to show empathy to the impact questions. You don't want to pounce. It'll put the prospect on guard. It's almost actually conversational, like you were talking to your best friend who's got a problem. You want to make sure that you're showing empathy and you understand that. With active listening, oftentimes you're sending back verbal and nonverbal signals to let the prospect know that you're listening. You can do it with questions such as, is that right? Or tell me about that, or go on. You can also do it with facial expressions, with you raising your eyebrows and different things like that, so that the person knows that you're listening. Making eye contact but not staring them down, and understanding, and again, act like you're talking to your best friend who's got a problem. How would you listen to that person? You're listening to the same, you're kind of doing the same thing, because the prospect, as you're establishing the relationship, is telling you about a problem that they have. So practices to learn an active listening. Use the following 3 practices. Focus your full attention. Look someone directly in the eye, but don't stare them down. Paraphrase is a very good way to do. Taking notes, as long as you've asked if you take a note. And using facial expressions and body language to show that you're actively listening to the customer's problems and the customer's situation. So we've seen this model before, creating value and building a partnering relationship. It's kind of a review of what we've done in the past. Strategic planning for the needs discovery and product selection. That is kind of a pre-call type of checklist, or a pre-call type of process where we review consultative selling model, existing prospect information, plan the questions, we review product options, we review customer, we also what we know about the customer, we also review the competition, see what he's using or she's using, those types of things, and we plan our time wisely. Then the actions taken during the needs discovery, and we talked about that this particular sales module, especially using the spin selling technique to try to understand needs. In the future, we are going to talk about presentation skills, elements of a good presentation, those types of things, but right now we're still on the needs discovery. So here is your 5, it says review 1 of 2, but it's really only 1 slide here. Here are your 5 review questions. Please, again, pick 4 out of 5 and give me 2 pages, a half page per question on the answers to that double-spaced. Again, write it in memo format. Hope you enjoyed the video. I am looking forward to see you next Monday night, same bat time, same bat station, and until then, I will talk to you later.